We often talk about how the media has been superseded by Twitter and by basically individuals who do their own research and do it a lot better. Um, but I think the past few weeks have shown us, and by the past few weeks, I really mean kind of the starting point really was June 27th. That was the debate between Trump and Biden, that the media still has an outsized amount of power that we should really be aware of. So, and it ended up, of course, now with this reinvention of Kamala out of thin air. So, first of all, when we had the debate, the entire media just flipped that one night. It was incredible. They went from Biden is the best president ever, and all these videos of him being senile and so on, they're all fake and that. Within 1 millisecond, they changed to Biden has to go. And then they got rid of him. And then they went from Kamala is an airhead and, she can't be entrusted with anything to Kamala is the best thing ever. And we should be so lucky to have that person become president. It's just completely unreal. But to me, the biggest lesson out of all this is that we underestimate how much power the media still has, unfortunately.
It was the creation of Kamala, done so out of whole cloth. There's no substance to her. And we saw, as you said, we saw the media turn on a dime, instantly pretend that when it came to Joe Biden, that they weren't just telling us a week and a half before that all the videos that were being put out were, cheap fakes. Because now suddenly all those videos were proven to be real. Everything that we'd been saying for years was correct, that they'd been defending. They turned themselves on a dime, and then suddenly it's, oh my gosh, we have to do something. Joe Biden needs to get out of there, as if they hadn't just been saying the opposite of that a week before. Then we saw the narrative shift to Kamala, and Kamala is no longer this kind of bumbling, cackling idiot who's cast away out of the side by the administration. A Joe Biden administration which refused to let her have any limelight, kept her out of the picture. Suddenly, she was the greatest candidate that was ever possible. And there was no acrimony. Joe wasn't pushed out by the DNC leadership. He gracefully stepped aside and embraced Kamala and helped put her up as his successor. All of that is a fabrication as to what actually happened. And you're 100% right. It's a warning that the media is still that much more powerful than we think they are. Yes, their power has been diminished, but none of this, regardless of what DNC leadership wanted, none of what transpired would have been possible without the direct. It's more than complicity is a good word, but it almost goes beyond that. This illustrated how the media is really the propaganda arm for the DNC. They pivoted exactly when they had to, said exactly what the DNC leadership needed them to say, promoted every single narrative, and now here we are.
I completely agree with you. And finally, I also agree that, complicity, even collusion, those words are not strong enough.
Right.
The media and the Democrats are one and the same. When the Democrats wanted to get rid of Biden, the media, as you say, flipped on a dime. There you go. It's the same thing. I think once you kind of start thinking about it in that way, everything makes a lot more sense. There was this other incident where there is no inquisitiveness whatsoever into the circumstances in which Biden was deposed. And the sort of the crassest example of that was when Nancy Pelosi was on CNN the other day. And she admitted it. She said, these are her words, I did what I had to do in terms of getting rid of Joe Biden. And it was Jake Tapper. And Tapper didn't follow up. He didn't say, he was like, anyone, any honest journalist, any honest person, anyone would have gone, what did you just say? Can you explain exactly how that went down? Nope. He just accepted it and immediately moved on. Perfectly happy, no inquisitiveness, and in fact, he was probably embarrassed. He didn't want people to think about what she had just said. So that was then shared on Twitter, and there is a core group of people, and that group is getting bigger, no question about it, who do understand, who do know what's going on, who knew that Biden was senile a long time ago, and who knew that Kamala is an airhead long time ago and who knew that Biden was deposed and all this kind of stuff, who knew that COVID came out of a lab. I mean, this is another one. I mean, the list is very, very long. But I think we underestimate the size of that group. Only because there are many of those on Twitter doesn't mean they exist in real life. And I think what they've done with Kamala, this reinvention of Kamala, which, by the way, at times they've called it that. She has a chance to reintroduce herself. I mean, how many chances does she need to have, right? They didn't sort of hide that fact that they were going to reintroduce her. Well, the way that went down, you now have probably half the country actually believing this crap. And as you mentioned, Democrats did want to give her a chance early on in 2021. Remember when she was put in charge of various things and so on? I still think the plan was...
She failed those tests miserably, and they sidelined her ever after.
Exactly. I still think the plan was to have her replace Biden much, much, much earlier.
Yeah.
But they probably underestimated how much of an airhead she is. Like, for instance, they couldn't unteach the cackle for 4 years. It seems in recent weeks she's sort of learned not to cackle, but they must have tried over and over and didn't work. So total airhead, messed it up really badly in 2021 and then just sidelined her. And then I guess they just hope they could somehow get Biden over the finish line and then, see where they take it from there. But the idea that that person has now been reinvented as the best presidential candidate to have ever run and the most competent and the most this and the most that is so completely surreal. And yet half the people believe it.
Well, I've referred to the media as the propaganda arm for the DNC, trying to tie it in a little bit more than just complicit. And even that fails to really convey what actually they're doing and how they operate. And maybe the better way is to step back and just stop viewing them as the media and look at who those people really are. All the people that are sprinkled throughout the quote-unquote media are effectively DNC activists. Many of them are actually former employees in the federal government under Democratic administrations. And we brought in any number of intelligence community members that now populate that space as well. So if you kind of strip away the label of the media and discard that mentally for a moment and look at who these people actually are, they slide effortlessly between the world of the DNC and the world of corporate media. There is no distinction. That just happens to be the portion of people that then publicize the DNC views out to the rest of our country. And, like you said, I mean, here we have Kamala that's been completely reinvented out of nothing. Now, that may prove to ultimately be her Achilles heel because she ultimately is nothing. There's no policy, there's no thought. She just, for the first time, went unscripted the other day, and it went exactly as you'd expect. It was terrible. She kept repeating the same phrase, 4 or even 5 different times. It's the return on investment. And it was terrible, and it exhibited a lack of knowledge. Although in that instance, she may have done it just well enough to kind of skate by. But even there's the media's involvement, is propping her up and trying to get her past this obvious chink that she has in her armor, that she just can't talk coherently. And, they're running guard on that. And because of the fact that I think one of the issues is, as I says, that there's people moving seamlessly back and forth. These are people with personalities that are able to appeal directly to the Democrat voters and get them to go along unanimously. It seems to me right now that pretty much every on-the-ground Democrat is firmly in the camp that Kamala is this welcome breath of fresh air and thank God we have her, because they've been told that by people they trust and they believe it completely.
And I wish there was a way to overcome this or to overcome it quicker. It really does seem to be a death by 1,000 cuts or a death by 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 or whatever cuts, because the process seems so slow. You would have thought maybe after the Russia hoax blew up in their faces that people would have learned. And by people, I mean, large majorities would have learned the media cannot be trusted on anything. They just make stuff up. They're an arm of the Democratic Party and so on. well, at least half the population didn't learn that. And then you thought, okay, maybe after this COVID thing, people would have learned that the media just lies to you about everything, not only the countermeasures and all that stuff, but obviously the origin as well. No one learned anything about that through that. But I think this example with Kamala, this reinvention of Kamala, is probably the most extreme we have seen so far, because it, unlike these other issues, it happened in such a short period of time. And as I say, I think the Biden thing is just as important, because that happened literally on the spot. On the night of the debate, the media just, you look at reports from before the debate and after the debate is 180 degrees, they just flipped. And then of course the reinvention of Kamala, again, just flipped overnight. Boom, suddenly she's the best thing ever. There's probably a lot of reasons why this happens and how this happens. And you mentioned there's a lot of intertwinedness between the people in the media and the people in, well, the Democrats. You have a lot of these people. George Stephanopoulos, what's he doing? You know, he used to be Bill Clinton's communications director. Suddenly he's this big guy on ABC. Then there's this other one, Psaki. You know, she was Biden's spokeswoman. Suddenly she's on, which one is she on? I don't watch these things.
MSNBC now, I believe.
One of those. And then there's a lot of other ones where you Bob Menendez, that corrupt guy out of the senator out of New Jersey. I mean, we shouldn't, cast anything on students. Not students, kids of people, daughters and sons, because of the sins of the father kind of thing. That's not what I mean here. But the fact that this guy's daughter is some bigwig on, again, one of those NBC. I don't watch these shows, but she's there every day. Shows you how completely incestuous the place is. And again, I'm not tying the daughter to the sins of the father. What I'm saying is, how is it possible that all these connect, what's the other one, that god awful woman, Andrea Mitchell, NBC, or one of those, just an absolute horrible propagandist, has been for years and years and years. Well, who's her husband? Alan Greenspan, the old Fed guy. I mean, there's so many. Who did Jake Tapper, our old friend here? Jake Tapper dated Monica Lewinsky. I mean, we could probably write a book about all these connections, and it's just completely crazy to me, where you have a country of 330, 350 million or whatever, and yet you have all of this interconnectedness to do with Democrats, the media, Washington, D.C. establishment. It's just a cesspool.
And that's why I came back to the point of stop looking at it as the media and try to start looking at them as people, because they literally are just transferring back and forth between positions within official capacities in Washington, D.C. and press capacities. And I don't think anywhere has that been more highlighted than what happened with the intelligence community officials who started appearing. Occasionally, it used to be it was sources. My intelligence community sources told me. Well, they just decided to cut out the middlemen, and they just decided to start employing intelligence community officials to tell you directly. That's how we got the narrative that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. And because these are people that Democrats are able to connect with, because they're really just party officials, I think that's one of the reasons why these narratives have worked over time, and why the media has this habit of delaying what they tell you for years, like their admissions on Russia collusion. And it becomes this very slow evolution that people feel comfortable with, and they don't see the glaring inconsistencies. They feel like the media's evolution is their evolution because the media took them through that personal evolution of views. Same thing goes with COVID, how people's viewpoints have shifted, but there's no sense of we need accountability for what we were told, everything that happened to us. It's just kind of accepted. Oh, this is where we are now. And there's never any look back as to how we got where we are now or who got us there.
And there's never any accounting for what was done, what people did in the past, what they got wrong. We haven't even mentioned all the Andrew McCabe. He was totally corrupt. He was the deputy FBI director. Peter Strzok, oh my goodness, one of the worst, and just caught red-handed over and over and over. We got his text messages. We We got the cover up with Danchenko in the Russiagate affair, where they got this guy, the guy disavowed the dossier, and yet Strzok, Comey, McCabe, Lisa Page, they're all out there. They keep pushing the lies about the dossier, even though they knew for a fact that it was all fake. And where did these people end up? They end up with gigs on MSNBC and whatever other CNN and all these other channels. And no one ever, and this is perhaps the most frustrating aspect about all this to me, no one ever says, hey, maybe we shouldn't have this guy on because, he was caught lying about this and that, and maybe that's not good, that's not credible, whatever. There's never any accountability for anything.
The two biggest examples, while you were speaking, I was thinking, and the two biggest ones that are most glaring to me that kind of typify this is Andrew McCabe, who you mentioned, and John Brennan. Yep. And Andrew McCabe was quite literally fired for lying under oath to the Inspector General. He lied to the FBI's inspection division, he lied to several other FBI officials, and he also lied to the Inspector General under oath. He lied under oath no less than 3 times. And it was those lies that got him fired. So you literally have the deputy director of the FBI, the number 2 guy within the FBI, fired for officially lying, and not just leaking to the media and lying to other people, but lying under oath. He's then brought in as a trusted MSNBC analyst. The dichotomy of that drives me insane. There's another example, and I mentioned Brennan. Well, Brennan, of course, was the propagator of the Russia collusion narrative. He's, to me, the originator. He pushed the information into the FBI. He helped to directed the creation of the intelligence community assessment, which would then dog Trump. He was brought on, and he was being interviewed. The one that jumps out to me was when he was being interviewed by Rachel Maddow, and this is kind of like deep into the Trump presidency. I think it was during the first impeachment effort. And she was walking him through all the things that he'd said. And there was a moment where you could see the shock on her face. He was talking about how he'd been seeing all these associations with Trump officials with Russians. And that's what set all his red flags off. And they started pursuing that conversation. Finally, Maddow asked him a simple question. She said, so, who were you able to, figure out where those associations actually, were? Were they concrete? And he said, we never were able to do that. And there's that moment, just for a second, where Rachel Maddow goes like, whoa, catches herself, and then just moves on. Doesn't ask him a follow-up question, just moves on. And you just see in that split second that everything is about creating this illusion of narratives, and there's no substance, and the media is a willing participant in that.
Brennan always reminds me of one incident where one particular moment in time in history that kind of changes everything. And I'll explain here in a moment what I mean by that. And that is July 28th, 2016.
I know exactly where you're going.
Brennan wanted to wash his hands of the fact that he originated so much of this. So he wanted to have a kind of an alibi. Because he knew what was really up with this Russia collusion hoax, specifically that it came from Hillary Clinton. So he presented evidence that had been obtained through some kind of how did they obtain that evidence? We don't know. It was some kind of intercepted communications.
Intercepted communications that came into the CIA and was to a fairly high-level CIA analyst who got it to Brennan within the span of, if not the same day, certainly the next morning. Less than 12 hours.
Right. And Brennan, what that communication said was that Hillary Clinton's campaign had a plan to vilify Trump with this Russia collusion nonsense. That was a huge problem for Brennan because the cat was out of the bag. So he was very, very, very devious and smart about it. On the one hand, he covered it up. I mean, we never found out, and I'll come back to that point here in a moment. But on the other hand, he also presented it to Obama, July 28th, 2016, as well as Comey and Strzok, even though we can't say for sure that Comey and Strzok found out on that day. We do know for a fact that they did find out in subsequent weeks. So you got those 4 people who knew: Obama, Brennan, Comey, and Strzok. What they knew is that this is all a Hillary Clinton scam. That's what they knew. That's what the intelligence said. At a minimum, even if people say, "Oh, they didn't really know. This was just intercepted communications." Well, at the exact same time that this intercepted communication shows up, the Hillary Clinton campaign is on CNN through Robbie Mook and those people pushing the Russia collusion hoax. So, it couldn't have been more clear. And the thing that upsets me the most in terms of Brennan and these other three as well, but especially Brennan because of the fact that he ended up being this TV analyst, is that he let the country go through hell for all these years knowing about that. What we just talked about, we didn't know about that until when was it, like September 2020, I think. This was hidden from us, the fact that there was this intercepted communication. So he was on CNN or whatever channel he's on, and by the way, Struck as well on his MSNBC gig there. And Comey, I don't think he has a gig, but he's constantly somewhere talking. Obama, obviously, we can talk about him some other time. But those four, we know they knew, but not one of them said a word throughout these 4 years. Instead, they were on TV saying the exact opposite. And to me, there's almost nothing worse than what these guys did.
I was just looking for it and I can't find it off the cuff, but actually looked really closely into that. And it was the Inspector General report that was talking about those events. And we had to piece it together from, throughout it wasn't in one section. It was little data points that were listed in the IG report. But there was one that was something to do with some small statement by Brennan to the IG about notifying Comey of this, where he said that I spoke to him immediately after or concurrently with Obama. And it was that data point that kind of made us sit up and go, wait a minute, forget about where he previously told the Inspector General, oh, I didn't tell Comey about that until later. No, he actually did tell him about that the same day. So we're all but certain that Comey was briefed on the Clinton plan at the real moment in time. What that moment also marked, without deviating too much, that kind of marked Brennan's exit from the overt strategy. He kind of had finished handing everything off to the FBI, turned it over to the FBI. Brennan then goes on to brief the Gang of Eight, individual briefings, by the way, which is not normal, and telling them different things that he wanted to be told, not the same briefing to every member of the Gang of Eight. And then Brennan goes off to get busy with the ICA. So
that's exactly right.
And these are the people that are being held up by the media as the pinnacles of source material and honesty and honest investigations, and the very people that, I guess, think about it another way. The very people that created all of these lies and all of these false narratives are the people that the media brought in to be held up as a paragon of virtue to explain to us what really happened. It's that old analogy of having the arsonist being brought in to fight the fire.
That is exactly right. And that's really the core of this. That is the proof, not that we need it anymore, the proof that the media is completely corrupt, or part of the Democrats. Same thing what we mentioned earlier. But what another aspect of this that just always kind of frustrates me when we get these reports, especially to do with the GOP, when the GOP issues its report, COVID, or the recent one about Biden, we talked about that on our previous show, where we it was kind of a whitewash, but there's many, many, many examples of that. Anyway, where I'm going with this is, go to the footnotes of those reports. Whom does the GOP cite? They always cite New York Times, Washington Post, maybe The Hill, Politico, and that's it. So it's as if the GOP itself is maintaining this vicious, horrible circle we're in, where the media gets to keep holding on to this outsized power, because they keep propping them up. It's as if the GOP itself thinks is still like in that mindset where, I got to put a citation here. Well, I can't possibly put some guy's Substack on here, even though the Substack is 100% true, or I can't possibly put up whatever the Federalist or, one of these other websites. That's not credible. I need to put up the New York Times. That is such a huge problem in my view, that unless we overcome that, we're just never going to get out of this vicious circle.
It's always kind of funny, right, when they do that, because it's like you can't trust anything the New York Times and Washington Post says, but you can trust this report by the New York Times or the Washington Post. And, I think I've said this a number of times, but, the New York Times historically used to be the transmitter of information for the Department of State and DOJ, et cetera. And Washington Post was a transmitter of information for the intelligence community. Now, those two have become more blended over time, so those lines, those delineations aren't what they used to be, and there's a lot of crossover. But those two institutions are the feeder institutions for everything else downstream in the media. And that includes like MSNBC and CNN and all these other, but it's both video and print, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All of that comes downstream through the conduits of the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are nothing more than direct mouthpieces for the specific aspects of our federal government. And that's how we're getting our news.
Sometimes it's just so extreme in terms of extremely obvious what's going on that you just can't believe it. There's one that I just came across recently, sort of again. I was doing some research and then it just came across that again. I was like, oh yeah, that happened. But let me just tell that story because it's just so incredible. On December 9th, 2016, so this has to do with Hillary's Russia scam, which again, all these people knew was a scam that originated with Hillary. Nonetheless, again, Brennan, you mentioned the ICA, Brennan and Obama decided to pin all this on Trump, even though they knew the truth. So on December 9th, 2016, the Washington Post, Ellen Nakashima, one of those stenographers out there, she puts out a story that was titled something like Obama orders intelligence community assessment or review or something of the election. Russia. Bad enough, but quite kind of benign when you consider what happened later that day. She changed the headline, or Washington Post changed the headline a few hours later. Stealth change. There's no acknowledgement of that anywhere, but you can see the evolution of the headline. And it was obviously done because they got a call from whoever tells them what to write to say, hey, that's not good enough. That's too benign. That's just factual. Obama ordered something. That's not good enough. We need this to be about Trump. So a few hours after that, same day, they changed the headline to say that Russia interfered in election to help Trump or to elect Trump, words to that effect. That actually happened. And then you look at the article, if you look at the link, it's the same link. So very, very, very obviously, the whole thing completely changed. And it was very, very obvious that they got orders that the initial story, wasn't good enough. That was not what was ordered, and you need to do better.
Ellen Nakashima is, in my mind, the absolute pinnacle of the worst. She is not a reporter. She is a deep state asset. She's the same person that had a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop, yet participated in the Aspen Institute war game as to how they handle things if and when the news of Hunter's laptop actually gets out. At one point in time, I created a compilation of all the articles that were Russiagate related, and she was always involved in the most important ones. I'm sure it was she that actually got the call that led to that headline change. But that shows the power of what they're doing. And I just want to quickly go back to that point you were mentioning of John Brennan meeting with Obama, knowing he just got information that it was Hillary who was going to create a fictitious narrative, which she then did, that Trump was a Russian asset. That moment in time is so illustrative of what was actually going on in the corruption. Here, John Brennan thinks it's so important he has to go rush to Obama. Rushes in with a hidden document that nobody can see, and there was stories surrounding that, but they never told us what it was, at least at the time. Tells Obama, guess what? Hillary Clinton has a plan to vilify Trump with, tarnish him. What do? They hide that. Not only do they hide that, but then rather than open an investigation into the Hillary Clinton campaign, 3 days later, they open the official investigation, 2 days later, whatever it was, they open the official investigation into the Trump campaign. off of intelligence that says Hillary Clinton's the one that's doing all of this. That, to me, epitomizes what was going on with the DC establishment. They took the exact opposite action that they should have taken as a means to not only protect Hillary Clinton, but to further the narrative that Hillary Clinton was trying to establish. They literally embraced what she wanted to do and then helped to propagate that while vilifying the Trump campaign. It's unbelievable to me when I think about it in those terms.
And that the sitting president of the United States was involved in that cover-up, in that scam, should be, one of the biggest stories of the decade, perhaps even the century. Where was Obama during this whole time that Trump was being vilified, saying, hey, I am still the president here, and I have to say this is not right. I've seen the intelligence. We shouldn't do this. The Democrats always talk about the adult in the room and so on. He did none of those things. And of course, after Trump became president, Obama was gone. He didn't say anything either. But coming back to the kind of the broader topic we're talking about here, two of the people in that room, or one of the people in the room, and one of the people who was informed in short order, that being Strzok, and the person in the room being Brennan, went on to work in the media. And as you say, they were saying the exact opposite of what they knew to be true, which kind of brings us back here to this power that the media still has in terms of shaping the narrative, because that media can't say they didn't know, because they had people working for them who not only knew but perpetrated the whole thing.
Yeah. And
yet, for years and years, they just continued with this hoax. And so in that same vein, what they've now done with Biden and what they've now done with Kamala is exactly the same, where facts don't matter, truth does, none of this matters. We're just going to make some stuff up. And then they just made it up. We talked about Waltz here a few weeks ago on the show. It was last week or so. The evidence against this guy in terms of his stolen valor and various other issues is crystal clear. It's right there. What does the media do? They just tell you it's not true. It didn't happen.
Same thing with his involvement with China.
Oh yeah, that we haven't even kind of scratched the surface on that.
That's a whole nother area to come. But
right, well, but they don't want to. They just pretend it didn't happen. Now, on that guy, I mean, you mentioned earlier that maybe this Kamala thing cannot be upheld because she is so vacuous. I hope you're right, but we still got 2.5 months to go or something like that. I'm not so sure. I'm kind of quite pessimistic. I think the media just still has too much power, and unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, the people who ought to know better, for reasons that I can't quite understand, to do with, I don't know, they're just so hung up about the old way of doing it or whatever, like GOP, citing only New York Times, Washington Post. So the media is going to lie about everything for the next 2.5 months. And the people who ought to know better are kind of going to play along. How often has it happened that the media puts out some narrative in the morning, and all that the so-called conservative media does is then engage with that narrative, instead of just saying, I don't care what you say, we're going to do our own thing here.
Yeah, that's probably a good lesson in point. And by the way, I want to make sure that I'm being clear that just because if Kamala is allowed to go before the people in an unvarnished kind of open setting, she's going to fall apart. I wasn't trying to say that the media and the DNC is going to allow her to do that, but rather when she does, it's a problem. One of the things that I've noticed, this whole idea that Biden was deposed in a coup. He absolutely, demonstrably was. But when we first started, making points about that, say on Twitter in front of a Democrat audience, they didn't know what to say to that. There wasn't a lot of pushback. It confused them. Now, when you say that to them, they're like, what are you talking about? It's false. That's false. Biden, was doing the will of the people. He was acting for the good of everybody. There was no coup. He endorsed Kamala. Kamala has been brought forth by Joe Biden. So the whole narrative has cemented and taken shape and taken form, and it came out of nothing. Every bit of that narrative is false, yet Democrats now believe that wholeheartedly. The other thing that I want to note that I think is a huge danger for us right now is the fact that the news cycle has so shortened the things that we would have thought would have remained in the headlines. I'm thinking of a Trump assassination attempt that should be front and center and in normal times would be front and center news, regardless of what the media really wanted, would have been forced to be front and center for months. We now have a news cycle that's measured in days and weeks. So that means when there is an error, when there is exposure, when something significant happens that's negative for Democrats, they are able to paper over that and move on. And within a week, everybody's forgotten that it happened. And there's a whole new shiny object to look at.
Maybe to close this out here, I'm very pessimistic on the whole. I think they will be able to keep it up for the next 2.5 months. I agree with you. If she ever had to do this kind of unscripted, then it might fall apart. But they're just going to be so super careful, not to have that happen. And during the debate, she'll just have by the way, I think she's only agreed to one to keep it super safe. She'll just memorize a bunch of platitudes and just kind of just knock them out. And I don't think there will be she'll come out of there kind of more or less unscathed. That's my prediction at this point. So I think they'll be able to keep it up. The one thing, and this ties back in with one of our previous shows on Waltz, that's the one thing where that's my only little kind of hope here that I have. His stolen valor thing is just one of those issues where truth does still matter. At least I'm hopeful about that. Once that stuff starts seeping through, maybe that will make a difference. That's the only one that I'm kind of holding out hope for, because certainly in terms of Kamala, they'll just keep up with this stuff they said about her being, the new hope and change and the new this and the new that and joy and all these wonderful things. And I just don't see a big breakthrough there where suddenly the whole nation realizes that she's actually an airhead and it's all made up. I just don't see that happening.
We saw a little bit of that, kind of a microcosm of that with Biden, because there was a lot of concerns about his mental decline before he became president. And all of that was, there was this pushback and papered over, becomes president, and then all of a sudden it starts becoming obvious. I think that's the same risk that you're referring to here with Kamala. The exposure comes too late, or people see it too late because of this willingness to buy into the media. And again, I think this danger of short-term news cycles that really is a real problem for us right now.
Trump has one opportunity, which, by the way, he did not use in 2020. And there were a bunch of us online on Twitter saying he needs to just learn a 1-minute speech and don't deviate during the debate about Hunter's laptop. That was the big issue back then, because people didn't know about it, because the media was burying it. And during the debate, he had the chance to do that, and he didn't. And he was cut off by that god-awful Kristen Welker. I want to talk about something else now. And I was like, okay, don't let that happen. This time, he's going to be confronted with these hoaxes. Kamala's going to bring up the hoaxes. The so-called moderators will bring up the hoaxes. He needs to be disciplined and have that 1-minute speech just on the ready to counter that, because it would be the first time that a lot of people will hear the truth about those hoaxes. So, and the speech has to be, no bravado, no exaggeration, no nothing, just simple facts. So the one that the Democrats keep throwing at him, even now, it's just incredible, is, of course, the fine people hoax. It would be very easy to write a 1-minute little blurb about, to especially direct it at people who don't know the truth. And again, don't do it in the Trumpian way. Just do it in a very casual, factual way. This is what happened. And point out that even far-left Snopes has debunked the whole thing. And make it clear that this is outrageous. Make it clear that this was about statues. It was not about anything to do with Nazis or whatever. But again, it has to be, it cannot be Trumpian. It has to be very, very disciplined. So give that 1-minute speech. And maybe, just maybe, there might be a few people out there who will go, oh, I didn't know that. And then those people might then go and start wondering about what else they've been lied to. So that's my hope, because you know these things will come up during that debate.
Yep. And it's no chance, by the way, it's a good point. There's zero chance that it's just random or that it's just Biden who keeps repeating this very fine people hoax. You know, people got to remember that stuff is written into his teleprompter. That's not Joe Biden ad-libbing and running off on his own and bringing up the fine people hoax over and over and over again. He did that at the convention. It's the people behind him who are scripting these things in to be said out loud, to keep reinforcing those things in advance of things like the coming debate. So,
and they probably tested this in terms of focus groups and so on, that this is a particularly bad one for Trump.
It resonates, right?
That's why they keep doing it. And remember, Trump only needs to win over 1%, 2%. I mean, this election will be close, just like the last two.
You're playing for that all-important middle ground in this.
So all he needs to do is he needs to get a few people to go and check this out for themselves, people who have not heard the truth about it. And he needs those people to go, oh my goodness, that can't be. I've been told for the past 7 years that Trump said Nazis were great people, but he never actually said it. You just need, again, you're not going to convince everyone, but you just need a few people. But you cannot do it by in a Trumpian way. If he's going to be at the debate and go like, oh, you and your hoaxes or whatever, that's not good enough. You need to specifically explain exactly what happened and do it in a very, very mature, normal, non-exaggerated way. Just learn it by heart. Just a few sentences, write them down and read it 100 times. And then during the debate, at the right moment, you just say it. And again, it's very, very difficult to win anyone over in a 50-50 situation. It's extremely difficult. But this one, because Democrats have put so much emphasis on it, I think is one of those where you might be able to win some people over.
You know, also just maybe trying to wrap this up and tie this back in, that hoax right there, that is one of those emblematic things that exhibits exactly how we opened this, the power of the media that still resides. A very easy thing to disprove, and something that happened years ago, and yet it's currently front and center with Democrats with their accusations against Trump, despite having been disproven by Democrats at one point. It is now a very real, very alive thing, and that shows the power that the media can bring to this.